This discussion today is part of the Changemaker mapping that Ashoka in Finland has carried out together with CHEATSHEET lab. And we can just start. I'll show you one slide about Ashoka. We are the world's largest network of social entrepreneurs and changemakers, founded in 1980 and active in the Nordics since 2011, so 10 years this year. We work with social entrepreneurs, so really systems changing social innovators, who we call our Ashoka Fellows, very actively also with young changemakers, because we see that more than 50% of our Ashoka Fellows have started their first social initiative before they were 20. So we want to support that early start into change making. And then we also work to strengthen the overall ecosystem for change making and social entrepreneurship. And that's really what we're doing here today, together with all of you. And I just want to sort of say a few words about our Changemaker mapping, and then I want to hear your opinion on the topic that we're talking about today. So we're going to share a short poll. But so this mapping that we've carried out together with Sitra Lab is really a health check on the ecosystem of change making in Finland. So we want to understand who are the change makers that are active in Finland, both what are they working on, but then crucially also, what do they feel is supporting them? What are the key enablers? And then also, what are some of the challenges that change makers are facing here? And how could we all together work to sort of strengthen the field and help change makers thrive and scale their solutions and the social value that they are creating? So that's what we did. And the mapping, as many of you know, because many of you have participated in it, focuses on 3 categories of change makers. So social entrepreneurs, young change makers, and change maker initiatives. And here, just very briefly, is roughly the participants according to the categories, according to genders. You'll find much more details in the actual maps themselves and in our analysis. And Celia, joining us from our team, can share the links with you in the chat. Also, these interactive maps, which is a key part of the mapping itself, they're all available online. And really fun to have a look at, and you can see which organizations are working on what, using which kind of skills. So that's a good way if you want to network as well and get familiarized with the changemaker landscape. And then this slide leads us into our topic for today. And so we'll take a few minutes to look at what we see emerging as relates to funding social innovations in Finland. But before that, we wanted to hear what you all think about the topic. The participants today would prioritize learning and training opportunities to better identify new and alternative funders and funding sources. Hopefully this discussion today will be a little mini start in this as well. Focusing on public procurement. Yes, that's super important as well. Closer collaboration with business. Oh, that's actually the most important one. So I'm reading them out in the wrong order. Good. So closer collaboration with business. Good. And then we have a majority of participants here who are looking for new funding partners and developing new revenue models. And that's also something we saw in the mapping, and that I think our speakers will also touch on today, because of course there are some changes in the horizon as well, especially if we look at those change makers who are working as foundations, non-profit associations, there is change around the corner, probably, if we look at STEA and other actors. So great to hear those insights from you. And then if we just look quickly at what we see emerging from our Changemaker mapping, you might have heard this before, but really I want to reemphasize that 70% of our participants said that the lack of funding is a key obstacle in creating impact. So it's something clearly where we need to focus. But then encouragingly, 18% of our participants said that they have very good relationships with their funders, that they are key enablers of their work, and that there's co-creation as well and long-term partnerships. And that's, of course, something that we would like to see increasing. And I think if we look at how we can have more systems changing social innovations in Finland, these sort of co-creating long-term partnerships are key. Then if we look at how changemakers are funding their activities at the moment, these are some of the most important funding sources. So government grants and fees, sales of products and services, foundation grants, and then a very small percentage of self-funding, external investment, and maybe as a slight surprise, also membership fees mentioned, by very few participants. And then I think what we would like to understand even more and focus on is how many changemakers are using multiple streams, so funding different parts of their activities with different kinds of funding. I think diversifying funding was a key theme in our mapping. So how can we support that? And then, of course, how can we help build those long-term relationships? That's something where changemakers can work to make that happen, but I think we also need to work very closely with funding organizations. And then we see that the financing is very linked to innovation. 61% of the changemakers in Finland that we reached out to are working on systems change, framework change levels. And there, of course, then we have a question of does government grants, does this system encourage experimentation? Does it encourage boldness and the long-termism that is needed to really develop systems changing innovations and scale the impact? So I think that's a very interesting question, and maybe something that our speakers can touch on today, and and how can we impact that? And then, of course, one thing that we were looking at as well is, do we have support really from the ideation to the implementation and to the transformative change phase? And again, that goes back a little bit to the long-term thinking. So rather than funding one-off projects, how can we build those long-term initiatives where there is a value to give more support to the same actor to continue to make create deeper change and scale the impact, rather than sort of fund something, one project, and then maybe even sort of make it more difficult for them to apply another round or next year. So these are some of the questions that I think are central to this topic. We also want to highlight networks briefly, because we saw that the need for stronger and especially cross-sectoral networks was so central in our mapping, and we see that this is linked very closely to the funding as well, especially when we talk about diversifying, building new types of partnerships, and thinking about new revenue models. If we're only working in silos or with a sort of close group of partners, supporters, that can be more difficult. So what can we do to open the doors, create those connections across sectors and bring people together? Can we have mission-based ecosystems? Can we get new players involved and interested in funding social innovations? So this is something where we see potential. And super briefly, these are our recommendations. Celia can share the full report again in the chat. You'll find much more detail there. But we recommend that we focus on 3 areas: building stronger foundations, really sort of the basics, focusing on that. We recommend that we focus on public backing in new ways. So how can we work within the public procurement system, help change makers get involved there? There's significant potential there, but also mission-based ecosystems, for instance, that I mentioned. The public sector can have a huge role there. And then number 3, closer collaboration with business. That's also something that was mentioned here. So there is the potential to create win-win partnerships across the value chain. And I think here Ashoka has co-authored a Catalyst 2030 report, really focusing on this as well. So we'll share that. There's a lot more to be said on this, and we'll hear from our speakers, who I'm sure will talk about these topics as well. But this is really to set the scene from my side. So once again, welcome to this discussion from Ashoka's and Sitra Lab's side. And I would like to now hand over to our speakers. And we will start with Katja Anoshkin from Arvoliitto. And maybe just a super quick mention as well, that we will have plenty of time for discussion. So maybe you want to write down your questions already to the speakers, but then we'll discuss them all at once after our speakers have presented.
Thank you very much, Amanda. I'm just going to share my screen. So my name is Katja Anoshkin. I'm from the Finnish Association of Social Enterprises, Arvoliitto, Arvo, and a little bit about Arvo. Arvo is a allegiance and network of social enterprises and other impact actors in Finland. It was founded in 2014. We are a membership-based, not-for-profit association promoting the interest of social enterprises in Finland. At the moment, we have over 70 member organizations working toward better society. But what is a social enterprise? Social enterprise is a business model that uses commercial activities to achieve social mission. It is not a legal form, but a business model. So legal form can be cooperative, association or foundation doing commercial activities, or a limited liability company. In Finland, associations and foundations are from in our membership are the majority. Cooperatives are historically been a very big social enterprises for legal form, and now 2020 or 2010 also we are seeing a lot of mission-driven startups and impact startups that are limited liability companies. All of these organizations use their profits to achieve their social missions. So they can be non-profit or for-profit, and we don't. Some people want to say that they are non-profit or for-profit, but the main issue is the use of their profits, and they use the most of their profits to achieve their social mission. There is no universally accepted criteria for social enterprise business model, but I'm going to tell you what we use as a criteria. And because there is no accepted criteria in Finland, there is anything from 2,000 to 19,000 social enterprises. It little bit depends on how strict criteria we use, and also what is the method of collecting this information. But we believe that the real number is somewhere between those numbers, so maybe 5 to 10,000 social enterprises. So 5 criteria for social enterprise are: the first is the clearly indicated primary objective of the business is to promote societal objective. It can be social, health, well-being. It also can be environmental, ecological, employment, arts, culture, whatever, but it's purpose before profit. Secondly, the enterprise operates on the market, and a large part of their income comes from sales of services and goods. But they are usually hybrid organizations, so they do public interest, not-for-profit activities, and then they do commercial activities, so both usually. The governance of the enterprise is independent from public sector. This means independent management and operational activities. So state-owned enterprises, in our view, are not social enterprises. Some people think that they are, or they are one form of social enterprise. The enterprise uses its profits primarily to promote societal objectives or to further develop the enterprise. So they can give their profits to another organization and use their profits to use it more philanthropically, but usually it's the case when association owns an organization that is doing the commercial activities, and then the profits are that the organization is generating are coming back to association or foundation. And fifth, the operations of the enterprise are based on ethical principles and code of conduct. It's transparent and in accordance with good governance. These criteria are very similar or aligned with European Commission or EU social enterprise criteria, and also criteria or criteria from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment from 2011 in Finland. Like I said, social enterprises in Finland are hybrid organizations. Their business models are hybrid, their funding is hybrid. So a few enterprises, for example, Venner, which is a food box company tackling societal problems of food insecurity, obesity, and well-being polarization. They provide food boxes for people in need. Mindu is a platform for finding psychotherapists and also provide video therapy application. Venner is a sort of fee-for-service type of social enterprise or business model. So they sell products to customers and use those funds that they collect or generate to buy the same boxes for families who need their help. They also use social sponsoring or venture philanthropy to do that type of funding, and also they have used different type of Business Finland funding mechanisms, for example, to scale their product abroad. Venner is at the moment working in Finland, but also starting their operations in UK. Also, they have a lot of collaboration between different type of associations. They are limited liability organization or company, but they do a lot of work with other associations as well. Mindu, on the other hand, is also fee for service, but the service, the psychotherapists are the ones who are paying for the service, and the target group or the beneficiary is getting it for free. So the one who's are in need of psychotherapy. Also very common social enterprise form in Finland is, of course, associations which are doing commercial activities. For example, international non-governmental organization like SOS Children's Village, which is doing a lot of public interest type of activities and using grants to do those type of activities. But they also provide a lot of social services for public sector, and that is done through public procurement. And basically that is market driven and activities, commercial activities. And they use all of their profits, of course, to further achieve their mission. So different type of funding and finances, commercial activities is in social enterprises, there should always be commercial activities, business to customers or business to business or business to government sales. Public grants for NGOs is used by associations and foundations, but this cannot be used to do commercial activities. Then there's traditional cooperation funding, like Business Finland funding for scaling or innovation or development. These mechanisms are not for every social enterprise in Finland, because usually associations or foundations might not be able to use these funding mechanisms. Traditional funding, of course, is for different organizations. Small organizations traditionally use bank loans less than large corporations or large NGOs. Foundation grants or venture philanthropy sponsoring kind of social sustainability activities of traditional businesses. This is something that also our members use, but maybe a little bit less than public grants, for example. And then impact investing, which is growing globally very much, but in Finland, it's still a very, very small amount of funding for social enterprises or any type of organizations. Usually impact investing is still focused on mainly environmental issues, social development goals, and those are usually connected to global problems. So social enterprises usually do very local and activities here in Finland. So impact investing is not that big part at the moment. But some examples, there is some examples, and social impact bonds is an exception of this. I'm going to go through that in a while. But basically, I have 3 points in my in here. So first is funding should recognize the diversity and specificity of social enterprises. Basically, funding mechanisms are based at the moment on very strict division between commercial activities and general interest activities. And this is it's really hard to, for example, you can get a grant for doing social innovations, but you cannot use that necessarily to do commercial activities or to fund or develop social innovations into commercial activities. So commercialization and scaling is really hard with grants and public grants. Organizational forms restrict the possibilities for funding. So different enterprises, social enterprises have different problems and possibilities, basically. The second point that I want to make is that we need more impact-driven public procurement. Impact-driven public procurement is basically procurement practices that promote positive societal and environmental impact. This can be in at least two forms. One is outcomes-based contracting, where service providers are contracted based on the achievement of outcomes rather than outputs or activities they deliver. Usually this entails linking payments to the achievement of outcomes. Also, this is known as payment by results. The other type of impact-driven public procurement is using social and environmental criteria in procurement. This means the social and environmental considerations are taken into account in procurement design. Usually this means using criteria that promote, for example, the use of renewable energy or employment of people with difficulties accessing employment. Why public procurement? Of course, social enterprises are selling a lot of their products to public sector, but when it is not defined how things should be done, but what problems need to be solved or what results need to be achieved, there is a lot more room for innovation and new solutions. So this is kind of the idea behind outcomes-based contracting. Also, innovation can be fostered through other innovative procurement practices, such as innovation partnerships. So if you don't have a solution ready with public-private partnerships or public and social enterprise partnerships, you can, public sector can buy innovations from organizations, and this is used in technological innovations, but also in social innovations, and some of our social enterprises have been in this type of innovation partnerships as well. One form of social outcomes contracting and impact investing is, of course, social impact bonds. And this is a type of outcome-based contracting and impact investing that incorporates the use of private funding from social investors on impact investors to cover the upfront capital required for provider to set up and deliver a service. So the problem with outcomes-based contracting is that the outcomes is basically, it can be very long time before the outcome is reached or seen. For example, 3 years or 6 years or even 12 years. And if the public sector only pays after the outcomes are achieved, then someone needs to pay for the services or solutions provided. So social impact bond is using impact investing and investor money to give that money. Projects are given precise and measurable targets, which reflect the desired increase in well-being, and the public sector only pays for the results that are in line with the set targets. There is 11 social impact bond projects in preparation or ongoing in Finland at the moment. Social enterprises have played a significant role as service providers in ongoing social impact bond projects. So, for example, Immigrationship, Live-palvelut, Children and Youth SIPs, Diakonissalaitos, Diakonis Foundation, SOS Children's Village, Ice Hearts, Nuorten Ystävät, which are providing services for these. Employment or long-term unemployed people are getting services from Live, Sunura, etc. So even though we have very few social enterprises in Finland, they are providing a lot of this type of services, because this is a possibility to do fund social innovations in a new way. Third and final message from me is we need more collaborative funding. Social impact bonds have been in Finland done in a way that there is a lot of collaboration in the process of making social impact bonds, but in many other countries, there might not be that much collaboration. But we also need other type of funding mechanisms to do collaboration. So usually there's a quote that says that funders search for more effective interventions, as if there was a cure for failing schools that only needs to be discovered in the way that medical cures are discovered in laboratories. This is what we call isolated impact. So it's very common that funders try to find one solution, and they want to only fund that one solution, and they want that one solution to create the impact. But we know that in complex problems, we need multiple different type of interventions together, and that will create the collective impact. We do not have enough funding mechanisms to actually fund this type of collective impact or ecosystem level solutions. So what we should do, funding should be more phenomenon-based, and it should be geared towards collective impact. It should encourage learning instead of only accountability. It should be long-term or longer term than like for a year, like it's now. And solutions should be context dependent and community based, because we know that we rarely can just move one solution that worked in another place. We can just move it in another place and expect same results. We know that in complex problems, it doesn't work that way. It has to be community based and context dependent solution. So thank you for all. And if you have questions, please put it in the chat. I can chat you there.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion also during this presentation, which is great. And we have time for questions after the presentation, so we can also discuss them together. And I would now hand the floor over to Markus, who will be talking also from the Finnish perspective. Markus is the managing director of Kukunori, so also giving us this perspective from the association and organization side. Markus, please go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and feel free to add questions, and we will have a chance to discuss them afterwards.
Thank you so much, Ashoka, for asking me here. Thank you, Amanda, for the introduction. Are you all seeing this the shared screen? Good. So my name is Markus Raivio, and I am the director of Kukunori Central Association for Culture and Wellbeing, representing 43 member organizations all over Finland, and about 17,000 people suffering from mental health issues. So what we are doing is we are trying to develop and create methods and tools that can increase well-being, especially with people suffering from mental health issues, but also with poverty or inequality situations. So I have a greatest day job of my life. Usually I wake up in the morning and drink a cup of coffee, and I read the newspaper, and I'm really trying to think, how can I think this somehow differently? That's my main job. And I have really great collaborators, my friends and colleagues in Kukunori, and I can play some ping pong with them, with the ideas, and maybe we can find some new projects and new innovations from that kind of work. So I would really like to start this presentation about funding with understanding that social innovations are something that you should do together, and usually it's about your thinking, and if we think by doing, you know, thinking and doing is always very relative. So what does it tell about our thoughts if we always do the same? We are repeating and repeating. Also with the what Katja was mentioning, all these challenges with the fundings, we always do the same thing. How can we do something different and find some other tools and other methods to make some kind of new kind of impacts and scale them much bigger? So my approach here is thinking about empathy and thinking about what do these people really care about. There's a lot of NGOs in Finland. I think there's thousands of NGOs and foundations and associations, and we can see that they are really creating these processes that there's not so much room for empathy anymore. That's something I'm very concerned about. But also in the public sector, it's very processed. How you get the funds and how you can create the project and how does everything like that go. So we should really try to find some new tools to find some empathy on. So I think social innovations are born from someone's frustration and demand. It can be my own, or it can be something that I find in work or in my environment. And I really believe that creating understanding that something new can be made is very important, that it is totally possible to find new solutions. I think this is the main thing here. So about the funding, I think the main funder for my actions in the last 10 years has definitely been STEA, from public sector, and also OKM, which is the Ministry of Education and Culture. These are both under funding of Veikkaus, which is a monopoly system, very unique special system in Finland, where all the gambling money from the money slots goes to charity and for these applications and these grants, about 700 million euros a year. So I think STEA has actually, I was just counting this morning that actually I think they have been supporting my ideas, or something that I have been participating with a lot of other people, about 20 million euros in 10 years, which is quite a lot of money. So I cannot really say that I'm lack of funding. I'm lack of funding that can scale and find different methods of funding. That's something that I'm more lack of. So as grateful as I am for these organizations that that been funding our ideas and projects, there are several. I think Katja was also mentioning about them. I think first of all is that they are all working as application model. So you have to make an application of grants where you promise something, some kind of results, and you have to be very specific on the target group and the result. So there's not so much room for experimentation. You really have to just make what you have promised, and that's not always very easy thing to do, and it's not very most efficient thing to do either. The second thing is it's hard to continue after the project, never mind how good are the results of your experiments or innovations. Because of the monopoly system, you cannot really find new revenues to back you up or to scale the idea bigger or to multiply it. There's a rule that everything that is granted from this Veikkaus money should always be free. So I think this is what there was a discussion about why the private sector is not so keen to invest on these ideas. Is this one of the problems is this mechanism of the system, and there's also really very specific target groups in every one of these. So what Katja was saying about collaborative funding would be a great idea, that maybe OKM and Kela and STEA could make a bigger impact. Think about together some funding, and also with the private sector. That would be very, very interesting to see. So I think that there should be different parts of ideas that you could be funding. I think we are heavily based on first ideas, that we're putting a lot of money that somebody has an idea and you have an application for it. But there's really a lot of phases on that idea and implement the idea that could be funded separately. If you really think about, let's say like IKEA, you know, the first idea to sell cheap furniture or cheap households, it's not that original idea, is it? But I think that the innovations of how do they do it, ideas of executions are very innovative. I think that's something that we should really see, that there's different parts that we should fund separately also. And I think the main thing that I really have seen, we have about 11 projects, innovation projects going on right now at the same time. And as we're doing these funding applications where we are promising all the lands and all the stars and moons, they are very usually very exact description of what's definitely not going to happen in that project. So it's really hard to, you know, to change the course and find that, hey, there's something really valuable here. There's something that really is really meaningful for these people. It's really hard to change that course once you have got that grant. So there's a lot of innovations happening outside the scene, not in the social welfare field. If you think about, you know, isolation for young adults and mental health issues, there can be some application like Pokemon Go, and for some reason everybody's just going outside, which we have been playing for 200 million euros to get them outside from their homes. And there's some kind of a private sector's innovation that doesn't really have an intention to do the things that is actually doing the innovation. I think that's very interesting. Also, there's so many good ideas that you cannot really, it doesn't sound very good on grant application. If you think about some kind of really simple kind of something in this common ground, changing behavior of people, you know, if you have like cigarette butts in the parks and you want to clean them, and you put all this box over there, it says, who is the best player in the world? Is it Ronaldo or Messi? But people are really looking for the cigarette butts, not only their own, but they're really cleaning the parks to make sure that Ronaldo is going to win. I think Ronaldo is gaining a little bit ahead over there, or maybe having a, you know, like a trash can. Actually, there's a trash can from, I think from Denmark, that makes that kind of sound like pew. It's like the longest trash can in the world. So people are really taking trashes from the parks and just putting them on that trash can. But how can you really pitch this kind of idea in grant applications? It's very hard. With good ideas that, so I think private sector had made these ideas, not public. There's also a lot of cultural concepts as obstacles to fundraising, what I think. And one of them is that there's some kind of idea that NGOs are not really allowed to get any kind of investments. They're just getting grants. Only companies get investments. And this is something that we are thinking about. This is our thoughts that I think we should really analyze and think, how is this really necessary? Or funds raised, you know, shouldn't be used for let's say overhead or marketing or scaling. So if you cannot really use that money but only for that small action, the NGOs will stay small forever, and the companies will always have that ahead. Also, there's not so many risk takers, because, you know, if you have a company like Uber, you can put 5 years of negative income on it, and investments are okay with that. But if you have a 2-year project with the NGO, it has to go. You have to nail it right away, or otherwise you have somehow lost the charity money. So there's a little bit different rule books for NGOs and companies, and this is something that we should really work on and think about this. So as I'm working as a director, I'm trying to find ideas and trying to make these grants about 10 of them in 1 year. And I'm working in the overhead. So if the overhead costs are very small, there is no marketing, there is no scaling, there is no new projects. So we should really think about it. If I'm giving money now to charity, I would love to give. We're going to promote this campaign. I can give 100 euros for that now. But this is something that we really have to think about differently. But it's also that this system, which we know that it's very complex system and everything relates to each other. Who has made this and who's in the power of the system is the same system that's sustaining this inequality and poverty. So as Audrey Lauder has said very cleverly, I think the master's tools will never dismantle the master house. So we really have to find some new ideas, new tools, new methods. And this is why we are here, I think, why it's important to be here, that I think there's a lot of propeller heads and change makers here in this minutes. And I think we are wanting to do things differently and different things than others. And if we're doing the same things, it's okay also, but we can do them differently too. So I think Changemakers should unite, and I'm very, very glad that that Ashoka is now in Finland, and I see this as a big possibility to discuss about this and make some kind of new kind of collaboration, new kind of networking, which we can get also our sayings through to better. So in the end, I would just like to make this. We're making cheat sheets about how to make social innovations that are getting funded. So I think you should see this. We were thinking that there's about 6 kind of models that doesn't really need a new idea at all. I think the best ideas usually are not new. They are used ideas combined with other used ideas, and that makes them new ideas. So if you can take some kind of model from combining 2 models from different fields, let's say like we have this culture house model where we took the Boy Scouts model, what Boy Scouts are doing, and try to implement it in mental health work. So we are training young adults, mental health clients to tutor functional groups to each other. And that's from the Boy Scouts, but we can just make it a little bit different in our field. So the second one could be some kind of new application about this culture house. We made a culture house model. Okay, let's go and take it to prisons to see if it works in prison with the prisoners. We call this model kind of tourist kind of model, that we're going to some other environments, or taking something, removing some kind of element from some very famous template, let's say like football, which I think is a nice model. But it doesn't really work with our clients, our target group, because there's so much running on it. So what we did, we take a little thing out from the football. We took that running out. We called it walking football. We have about 15 soccer teams in Finland now with walking football teams, and it works very good because we're just taking little things, something out, or adding something in. So maybe we could find this kind of ideas together, and see what happens, and also challenge a little bit this funding system to be more flexible and more empathic with the target group. I think that's not so processed, a little bit more empathic. So I'm very grateful to be here, and I would like to thank you, everybody, and I'm ready for any kind of questions you would like to have. This is my point of view for this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Markus. This is a fantastic cheat sheet. I hope you all cheated and took a screenshot so that you have it for later. You guys have such fantastic concepts. I mean, walking football and well, all of the other projects as well. But I think some very good sort of practical tools for thinking as well can be taken from Markus' presentation. Great. And again, there's a lively chat going on, and I encourage everyone to keep at it. We will now listen to Laura Laura Katana, who is here from FASE, and you can tell us a little bit about FASE as well. And Laura will give us a more European perspective now. I mean, we've had two local points of view, and now we get a more European point of view as well. And after Laura's presentation, we will take time to discuss what we've heard. So feel free to write down questions and also keep them for later. Laura, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Amanda. Thank you for the invitation. Maybe a few words about myself. I actually worked for Ashoka for about 5 years before joining FASE, which is also a spin-off from Ashoka Germany. So we're very much in the close family. And I'm particularly delighted to be here today and also hear a bit from the insights that you collected from the Changemakers Map, which I also did probably 5 years back in Romania, my home country, when we launched the office there. So I do know the power of this mapping and the connections that come out of it, as well as the insights regarding the challenges and potential solutions. So I do encourage you all to remain connected and continue the conversation after, because I can promise you, I can guarantee that it will really be quite helpful in the future for the development of the ecosystem. So a few words about FASE. We are, as I said, an initiative of Ashoka Germany. We are also a social enterprise ourselves. We are partly owned by Ashoka Germany, so a non-profit as well. And we very much work for the impact. We're trying to create a business case that can ensure our, let's say, permanence, or at least until we are needed in the sector. We're hoping it will not be forever, because what we do is we essentially support social entrepreneurs to identify the right investors for their own mission and to help them grow through that investment. So we are hoping that in the future there will not be a need for such a bridge making player in the ecosystem, because ideally entrepreneurs and impact investors will meet naturally. So that's our let's say long-term vision. So far, since 2013, we have worked with about 60, well, a bit less than 60, about 55, I think, social entrepreneurs on 60 investment rounds, because some of them came back for additional support in future rounds. And so we raised until now a bit more than 30 million euro in different types of instruments, because as was mentioned before, when we think about impact investing, we don't necessarily think of, well, we do think of repayable finance, but not necessarily always the classical equity and debt kind of instruments, but we're very much working with mezzanine instruments, which essentially take a bit of characteristics from both equity and debt to make it more tailored to the needs of the social entrepreneurs. And don't worry, I'm going to give you a concrete example so you can understand a bit better what I'm talking about. And also, most importantly, we work very much with what we call hybrid finance, which means that often, you know it from experience, entrepreneurs have business models that also still require a part of philanthropy, of non-repayable capital. For example, for advocacy work, which is fundamental. So we are not doing that ourselves, but we do acknowledge the importance of putting together different types of capital in the game for each specific case and entrepreneur. This is why we work with the entrepreneurs to compile and to put together this kind of diverse investors around the table. We have received quite a lot of, let's say, good words on the work we've been doing so far. This is also why we increased over the past years our activity and expanded to new countries. So we also worked with an Ashoka Fellow from Sweden this year, for example. And we have worked, I think, now in probably about 8 or 9 countries across the EU, and we have a network of about 1,000 impact investors really spread around the continent and a bit outside as well. So basically, the way we started is that we looked into the Ashoka ecosystem, into the needs of the Ashoka fellows. And already in 2012, 2013, funding and financing was a major challenge, right? Unfortunately, for some of the countries, and I understand Finland is still in there, this has not necessarily changed that much, but we are hoping that it will. And we found that there was this myth that if you had a graph like this for your organization where the revenue would never meet the costs curve, then there is no opportunity for repayable capital. And we wanted to, debunk this myth. We wanted to show that that's probably not always the case, and that you could split this graph in two, where you could have one part that indeed will never be covered by revenue. As I said, the example of philanthropy, the example of advocacy, or the examples of emergency, situations, emergency services. And then there are parts of the entrepreneurial venture, right, that could potentially pay back the capital invested. So we decided that that's where we wanted to focus on, this kind of entrepreneurs that are not necessarily at startup phase, in let's say not in the seed phase, but those that, like Ashoka Fellows, have proven that there is a solution to a social challenge. So they have proved that the impact can be created through that solution. The theory of change was validated, but also have proved that there is a potential business case. So it's this kind of hybrid entrepreneurs where they are looking to grow, but they are facing challenges because they are looking at the ecosystem and they can't really find the right investors for them, because they are essentially, their investment need is too large and too, let's say, uncomfortable for philanthropic players, and also too small for the institutional social investors. So we call this the early stage financing gap. At the time, it was a bit below 500K. Now in Western Europe, we see that this kind of financing need has grown a bit. So we're looking at entrepreneurs that are looking for about up to €1 million, and they are still facing this kind of challenge because the sector has grown overall, but it has grown a lot. So institutional investors, impact investors, that's the focus that I'm taking right now. They are moving more and more towards larger stage entrepreneurs, which have a larger financing need. So the gap remains probably now a bit below 1 million. So that's why we decided to, and you mentioned already in, I think in some of the notes in the chat, that one of the problems is the internal, let's say, process and the lack of capacity of entrepreneurs to actually undertake such a difficult, let's say, fundraising exercise. On one hand, because, yeah, they don't know and they don't have access to the ecosystem of impact investors, and they don't know how to approach them. But even before you get there, many times they don't really know how to structure the business case in such a way that it can deliver the revenues and that it can actually attract investors, right? Or even prepare the materials for an investor, speak the language of investors. So what we decided to do is to create this hybrid finance expertise and provide it to the entrepreneurs. So we essentially become part of their teams, so that we can actually load off their burden. They need to remain, the entrepreneurs need to remain focused on delivering the impact. That's no question for us. Not everyone should be an expert in impact investing or impact finance, right? So what we're trying to do is really, we're sitting at the table with them and trying to work out one solution for each case. So it's very much tailored approach. We try to structure the case for them, also the right financing for them, the type of instruments and so on. And then we prepare and deliver on all the fundraising process. So what we call the transaction management, which goes from preparing the materials to reaching out, preparing the list of investors and reaching out to them. And essentially the entrepreneur comes back into the story when we have identified already the investors that are interested to have the conversation and consider an investment. So that really makes it much easier for the entrepreneurs to, not get defocused from the generation of impact, which is so crucial for yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. If there are questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. I'd be happy to respond after. So I promised a case. So I decided to take the case of another Ashoka Fellow from Germany. He was one of our first social entrepreneurs that we worked with. And if you don't know yet about Discovering Hands and the founder, Frank Hoffman, in a nutshell, what he does is that he trains visually impaired women to act as medical tactile examiners in the detection of breast cancer. Yeah, so essentially visually impaired women have better tactile senses, and with a specific methodology that he created, and he is a doctor, a gynecologist, they are able to identify much quicker very small particles of breast tumor. This methodology has been validated by universities and has been implemented across Germany. And he has a very interesting business model where he got the insurance companies to cover the costs of these examinations. So essentially women go into their doctor's practice. There is this visually impaired woman trained that can do this kind of examination. The woman pays for the service, the insurance covers it, and then the doctor that hires the visually impaired woman pays a fee to the to Discovering Hands for the use of some specific strips that are necessary in that examination. So it's quite an easy, even though difficult to explain, but quite an easy model where Discovering Hands sells some sort of strips that are used in the examination in the doctor's practices. And for this kind of model, he needed to grow, and there was a lack of liquidity at the time. So he needed some additional capital until he reached break even. So as many social entrepreneurs, he structured his social enterprise in two legal entities, one that was a for-profit and another one a non-profit. But the non-profit actually owned the for-profit entity. So in Germany, I don't know how is legislation in Finland, but in Germany, the not-for-profit actually can have shareholders. So those were different kinds of investors that provided philanthropic capital, like in a classical non-profit, but they were also part of the board. And they decided that they could provide a subordinated loan. So that's a loan that gets paid after all other debts are being paid in case of a default. So that's a loan that goes from the shareholders of the not-for-profit towards the for-profit entity. Now, that's maybe less interesting. What's interesting to know is, okay, there was a loan, yeah, for those of you who don't need to go into all the finance nitty-gritty details. But what are the characteristics of the loan that made it so interesting for a social entrepreneur to take it, to accept it, right? Well, on one hand, it was about the return. The interest rate was not a fixed rate that you could get from the bank, but it was an interest rate that was linked to the operative profit. Yeah. So the more the organization was growing, the more they had, let's say, cash to pay back to the investors. So that's what we called, if you want, patient capital. And it goes very much into what, let's say broadly we can call mezzanine financing. Also, there were other elements, and you can see them also here. For example, how much of the loan was being paid back depended also on how well the enterprise was delivering on the impact goals. So obviously you can see at the discussion in the beginning, there was not a discussion only about the financing elements of the deal, but also about the impact goals. So this is really, really important because the two need to come together. Yeah, the more impact I make, the less I need to pay back, essentially. And also there was a very high maturity of 6 years with a possibility of early repayment. But more interesting is that there was a grace period. So the investors knew that in the beginning it would have been impossible to get paid the interest rate. So there was this grace period until a certain point, some certain financial milestones. So I think this is really, really important to think when you consider taking private capital, to think what are those details that could make your life as a social entrepreneur easier, and where the investor can actually prove that they are aligned on the mission with you. Because if they are eager to make this kind of small but very important changes to the classical way of giving a loan, then that's a very important proof that they will probably be on the same page with you in terms of the impact goals. So how do you know if you're investment ready? There is one sort of online cheat sheet as well, if you want. It's an investment readiness check that was created also by an ASN member. So I do recommend you take this very quick test. It probably takes about 10 minutes, but it can already give you a quick idea of where you might be struggling on which of these elements. So that's one specific tool I always recommend, and we ask our social entrepreneurs to go through it before they get back to us for a first conversation. And then also, I suppose that you guys know the social investment toolkit of Ashoka and Mark Cheng. If not, that's another very useful tool that we always use. As you see here, there are 8 modules. This toolkit is available also online, and they have very useful videos if you don't want to just read the chapters. But I can also guarantee that the chapters are useful because they have also concrete examples. So if you look at business models, they even have, real and fake, let's say, examples, or financial models. You can find really the Excel file where you can input your own data, and it can give you some help in assessing a bit where you stand on the finances. So really, I recommend you go a bit through this because, it can really change the way you look at your own venture. And do I still have 2 minutes, Amanda? How do I stay with that?
I was just going to say we would need to slowly wrap up because we have, I'm hesitant to interrupt any of you because the presentations have been so interesting, but we would like to take a little bit of time to discuss as well.
Absolutely. So I'll stop here and I remain for questions if there are, happy to take them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's fantastic. And Celia has also shared the link here to the social investment toolkit in the chat. So please have a look. And Katja has also shared resources being shared in the chat as well that can be saved for later. We wanted to take, just for everyone to get to know each other as well. I mean, we've been chatting in virtually here, but we take a short 6-minute breakout discussion so that we have a little bit more time together to discuss some of the questions that have come up. And then after that, we can take those questions from the group also to the speakers. And I think free flow, because there's been so much activity, but also what we had in mind was to think about from everything that we've just heard, 3 perspectives on funding. What's the one insight or practical advice that you can use in your own work, and how? Because if we can help each other sort of, find ways of getting better at financing our work and thinking about our funding strategy, I think that's very valuable. Thank you so much to everyone. Hope that you had good discussions in the breakouts. Glad to see most faces also still here. Now, we've had a lot of questions in the chat, but who would like to, I would almost say just raise your hand, questions that you would like to share now with the speakers while we're all here together. Either something that you discussed now in the group, or something that you were asking earlier and really want to get an answer in plenary as well. And I will see if who is raising their hands, and also if there are comments or insights from the chats from the breakout discussions, please add them in the chat as well, because they might be very interesting and useful to the wider group as well. But is there something that you wanted to ask one of the speakers, or sort of a comment that you would like to share with the broader group? You could raise your hand and ask the question as well. We have 9 minutes. Camilla, please go ahead.
Yes, good morning, everyone from Helsinki. I'm Camilla, public speaker, diversity inclusion expert, and also changemaker. I do identify myself as that. Question for, based on the comments, I really enjoyed the conversation. How do we make sure that the change makers and the capacity for change makers is given to everyone in the population, including Finnish, Swedish speakers or non-Finnish and Swedish speakers? Is there a way that we could, because I speak Swedish, I speak Finnish and English, so is there a way we could spread the message more to really bring more people to this beautiful topic of social innovations. Thank you.
Do the speakers who feels like they want to answer this this question? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I can say that I think one of the best parts of digitalization and is that it's really changing the power from the organizations to the people, and it's much better possibilities for everyone to be change maker and be part of change making. Maybe more than ever. I think what we call the fourth sector is really rising up also in Finland, and that I think that gives us many possibilities. That you don't really have to be an organization based to have to be creative and to build social innovations. You can be just common ground people, or maybe even the service user, and that's I think it's very important. So I think we are really going ahead there. But as you ask, how can we make sure, and how can we make the structure so it could be even more easy? So it wouldn't be just shouting in the social media, it could be something else too, much more productive and creative. Thank you.
I think that one way of doing it is through educational system. We have entrepreneurial studies now in every level of education. We should have social innovations and social, how do you create social innovations and that type of education in all levels. So it's normal to kind of start building your own impact or efforts if you wish to. Also, we were talking about in our group about that it's hard to get funding for individuals if you don't want to be an entrepreneurs. Also, cooperatives are one good form of doing social innovations without being entrepreneur, and that is being done in schools, I believe, in many places in Finland at the moment. So basically, cooperatives could be one form of doing social innovations, and without entrepreneurship, and without also associations, of course, or NGOs are a form.
Yeah, fantastic. Are there any other questions or comments that you want to? We have 2 minutes, and then we're just going to share a final slide. We are doing our next event in May, so I just want to share the details of that. You'll get a follow-up invitation afterwards, of course. But is there something that one of you would still like to raise or ask one of our speakers?
Can you hear me, Amanda?
Yes, but
I don't know how to raise the hand. So
now we can hear you.
Okay. Good. No, I was connected to the previous question or remark regarding how should you spread this message around among the young people. But Amanda, you could expand probably how the change-making schools concept Ashoka has, because that's a tool that you use. I've been in one in Stockholm, for instance. I met one in Nacka, I think it was. And how isn't that a way to foster, in a sense, early birds when it comes to social?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and thank you, Mbuelik, for raising that. So if we think about, yes, sort of fostering change making early and within, a larger community, or sort of more broadly in general, Ashoka works very actively with schools and with universities. So we have something that's called Ashoka U, and then Changemaker schools, as were mentioned here. where we bring the skills of empathy and change making into the curriculum already in the sort of early stages of education. And this is really part of Ashoka's vision of sort of creating a world where everyone is a change maker and sees their own sort of power and agency to create new solutions. So that's really interesting. In Finland, we don't work with schools, but we work with young change makers. So youth between the ages of 16 and 25 very actively. And that's something that we will continue doing also to spread the message. Now I see that we are getting closer to 10:30. So I just wanted to share that we are doing another one of these events on the 12th of May on a Wednesday, again in the morning. This time we're going to do it in Finnish. So the topic will be tunnistammeko muutoksen tekijän, and we'll be talking about identity and awareness and how how we can work to strengthen the changemaker identity. So also related to your question, Camilla, because we saw that while we have very similar values driving changemakers in Finland, we still don't have a sort of strong sense of belonging, maybe to a community or identity. So this is something we'll discuss in May, and you're all very warmly welcome for that discussion as well. And as a final send-off, we wanted to get your input on what are topics after this discussion on funding. What are topics that you would like to dive deeper into with regards to funding? So Celia will share a quick Menti. So please give us your insight. What would you like to focus on and dive deeper into? And with that, I thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Once we've shared the Menti result, we will send everyone off, and the recording will be shared with you. I will also ask the speakers to share their presentations so that we can share those. And please be in touch, and everyone who shared their LinkedIn, feel free to connect as well. And of course, contact us at the Ashoka Nordics for any questions you might have. Final remark is also that we are doing this Changemaker mapping now in Sweden and in Denmark, Norway. If you guys are part of an organization that's working in those countries, or you have an interest in finding out more about what unites the Nordic changemakers, then stay tuned. If you sign up for a newsletter or follow us on social, you'll see what's happening on the Nordic level as well. You want to share the results? Collaborative funding, debt financing, debts and loans, cross-organizational collaboration, and changing mental models. Very interesting. This is something that we take with us, and hopefully we'll see each other in a discussion focused on one of these topics. Thank you, everyone. I think with this, I hope you all have a lovely Wednesday and week ahead, and let's stay connected.